Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of Rabbi Adam Kligfeld's weekly Rashi study class.
So this is our yearly week of the class where we're studying the Parsha, right? It happens obviously only once a year, and it's such a delight because, wherever we'll be this Shabbat morning, unfortunately we'll not be together in shul. If we hear the Torah reading, we're going to hear really familiar and resonant words because we've been lingering in these words for quite a while. I find that to be a delightful synchronicity every year, and when it's a delightful synchronicity, and it's a reminder of how quickly the Torah reading goes when you're just listening to it. It's a different experience, obviously, than studying it, and it reminds me once again of the wisdom of Chazal, of the rabbis who enjoined upon all of us that which I don't mind admitting to you, I've never been able to do on the level that we should. That every week, every Jew should do Shnayim Mikra Bechad Targum, should read through the entire Parsha twice, and one Targum either into another language or to commentary before you get to shul, so that your experience of shul is allowing those words to just kind of do their magic, but you've already done the study. So it's always good to have aspirations. Okay, we're in chapter 3 of the book of Shemot. We are in the middle of the Rashis of verse 2. We didn't do the last one. Let me get us going with the verse, and then I'll assign one of you to read the Rashi. So verse 2, we're on page Kaf Daled in the Torat Chaim Chumash. Vayera malach Adonai elav. A angel, a messenger of God, appeared, was seen to him, right? If Vayera is literally was seen, but it's really translated as appeared, because it's to, not by him. Bilabat Eish, in some kind of something of a flame, right? And we're not going to go backwards, but we discussed that Labat could be from Lev, the heart of the fire, or it could be some variant of the word that means flame, like a Shalhevet or Lehava. Mitoch Hasneh, from within the bush. And we discussed how the mem here, can be wonderfully and confoundingly mean two opposite things. Me could be within and also can be from, meaning not within, like apart from the inside of the sneh, of the bush. Vayar, and he saw, presumably Moshe, V'hinei hasneh bo'er ba'esh, behold, the bush is a flame on fire. V'hasneh, and the bush, einenu, is not ukal. This is the, as we're about to see in Rashi, the passive of ochel, consumed. The bush was not consumed, obviously not consumed by fire. And we also, I think the first time we read this verse, looked at some of the translations. I think it's Everett Fox who translates it in such a way that the last phrase, V'hinei hasneh bo'er ba'esh, and this is a subtle difference, rather than it being the editorial voice describing the situation, he reads it as the Torah telling us Moshe's momentary reaction. So this is how Everett Fox translates it. And Yahweh's, that's how he does God, messenger, was seen by him in the flame of a fire out of the midst of a bush. I don't know if it's accurate. I don't know if he's right, but I love it, that translation. Out of the flame, in the flame of a fire. So he's reading Labat, more related to Lehava or Shalhevet as opposed to Lev. Out of the midst of a bush, playing around with what means. He saw, here the bush is burning with fire and the bush is not consumed, ! As if those words are representing Moshe's internal reaction, which is a slightly different way of communicating the meaning to us than saying that we, the reader, are being told this by the editor, by the editorial voice. So we're about to read the Rashi on the last comment of Rashi on Ukal, but before that, Rick and Barry.
Hi, a question on Einenu.
Yeah.
It seems like a really big word for just saying lo. It couldn't have just said lo ukal. The bush was not consumed. So when I see Einenu, I hear Hineni, and is that the intent there?
I don't think so. I think that is that its similarity to Hineni is a cigar just being a cigar here. It's my guess. Interestingly, in Hebrew, in biblical Hebrew, the words yesh and ein can be declined, right? In the grammatical sense of the word decline, which means like you conjugate verbs, you decline nouns and decline prepositions. And in biblical Hebrew, like in modern Hebrew, you don't yesh, which means there is, only appears by itself, and then a next word. But in biblical Hebrew, you say yeshcha, there is to you. And ein, which means there isn't, can be declined. Eini, I don't have. Einenu, does not have. So it's really just ein and lo turned into einenu. Lo there meaning lamed vav, to him, to it, not lo lamed aleph, no.
But you already have the subject in the bush. You don't need to him. Couldn't it have just been the sne and lo and ukal? Or does that, it can't be written that way?
I mean, I don't know how to explain it except that it can't be written that way.
Okay.
Or at least once the verse started to be written a certain way, the placing the lo there wouldn't have worked. You could have done it, the ein hasne ukal, but for some reason the way biblical Hebrew works is that once you have the sne, it also could be basne ein ukal, but the einenu it's just the way the language works. And by the way, the notion of declining nouns, my first semester of college, my friend Arya and I had passed into the last semester of required foreign language at Columbia. So we were passed into fourth semester of Hebrew. So we had to do 4 semesters of a foreign language, but we passed into the fourth semester. We had a wonderful professor, Professor David Yerushalmi, who's a sweet, sweet man, but was not a shticky man. And my friend Aryeh was a very shticky student, a good student, but a shticky student. And this Israeli professor, using proper English grammatical terms, would say, okay, so Adam, conjugate the verb likro. And then when it would be for a noun, he would say to Aryeh, like, okay, Aryeh, decline sefer. And Aryeh would say, no thanks. And the professor kept falling into the trap what the word decline when you're asking someone to decline something. So this is ein declined as einenu. Barry.
Interesting. The translation you just read would indicate that the flame is in the bush, but not the bush itself is not a flame. It's almost like looking at a hologram of a flame located inside the bush. And that might inform some of the grammatical construct of this sentence.
Yeah, we spent so much time on that last week, and Everett Fox tries to play around with what these words are trying to convey in terms of the image that we're trying to see, right? And we often talk about this. How would you depict this in a picture or in a movie? And several people have tried to, right? But his reading is a fire out of the midst of. So that's how he does mi toch, because toch means in, mi means out, from. So out of the midst of is actually a wonderful way of rendering mito. It's not the only way, but it's a wonderful way.
It's like a hologram located in the bush.
Yeah. Larry or Diane, does Aryeh, which translation do you have in front of you? Do you have Alter? Someone has Alter in front of them, someone has Aryeh Kaplan?
I have both. We have both.
Okay, what's the English there?
And the Lord's messenger appeared to him in a flame of fire from the midst of the bush, and he saw, and looked, the bush was burning with fire, and the bush was not consumed. So from
the midst of?
Yeah.
Okay. Which one is that? That was Alter?
Alter. And Aryeh Kaplan has, God's angel appeared to Moses in the heart of a fire in the middle of a thorn bush. Huh. As he looked, Moses realized that the bush was on fire, but was not being consumed.
So that's interesting. Aryeh Kaplan is doing almost a bit of a transliteration or kind of a lyrical rendering of it. Read again how he says the mitoch hasneh.
In the middle of a thorn bush.
Yeah, in the middle of. Interesting. So that's very different than out of the midst of.
Wait.
In the heart of a fire. So
Yeah.
he calls it the heart of the fire.
Yeah.
In the heart of a fire, in the middle of a thorn bush.
Yeah, really interesting. So, and with heart, he's ruling on the side of the commentators that read it as lev, not lehava. Remember, Rashi tried to play it both ways, right? He says shal hevet eish, libo shal eish. These are interesting decisions that a translator and commentator has to make.
And he also, in his notes, he actually references why he did that.
Yeah, is it worth sharing?
It's a little bit cryptic. He says, heart, Tanchuma, Ibn Ezra, Moreh Nivukim, it's transliterated. And then Radak, he says, Sherashim, Esvi Lavav, or flame, Targum, and then Rashi, or essence, Ibn Yanach. I never heard of it, Ibn Janach. So
The most interesting,
kind of cryptic notes at the bottom.
Yeah, the most interesting thing that's referenced there is the Moreh Nevuchim, which is Maimonides, Rambam's philosophical and theological treatise, and apparently, if I had known this, I'd forgotten that he spends some time in Moreh Nevuchim breaking down what happened in this scene, which makes sense for someone trying to lay out a basic human theology. You'd want to know what happened in the moment that God revealed God's self to the Jewish people. So I'll have to take a look and see what the Rambam says there in Moreh Nevuchim. Good. Okay, let's look at the last Rashi there. Matt, we haven't heard from you in a while. Do you want to pick up, and then since this is a short one, you can keep going with the next verse on Ukal, which is
okay. First,
I don't think we did the second Rashi.
Yeah, we didn't look at. Yeah, I think we did. That we looked at that verse Imonochi Basara. We didn't do that.
We didn't look at Psalm 91. That's for sure.
Okay. Then maybe we set it up, but we never look at it. Okay, fine. So then, Matt, please begin with Mitoch Hasneh. But you were about to say something?
I'd be glad to. But I wanted to throw something else onto the fire, so to speak.
Well done.
This discussion reminded me of something I read a long time ago about creosote bushes, which live here in the Mojave Desert. They're very oily, and they can catch on flame. And it turns out that they don't grow inside it. But there's
going in and out, Matt.
There's something called dictamnus, and I'm turning off my video. There's something called dictamnus, which grows in North Africa, and it's a plant that excretes so much oil that lighting a flame next to the flowers causes the plant to be enveloped in flame. And this flame quickly extinguishes without injury to the plant. So this reference here says it's not found in the Sinai Desert today, but maybe the climate was different 3,000 years ago and it was found there. So, or at least it gave the whoever wrote this down a prompt for a very powerful image.
Yeah, wonderful. That's an interesting contribution. I always have an interesting array of feelings and thoughts when something miraculous and inscrutable in the Torah is linked to something potentially real and scientific and discernible, right? Because on the one hand, it helps reify the story, but it also, I'm not looking, me personally, I'm not looking for the scientific underpinning of the story, right? I'm trying to hear from it age-old religious and human wisdom. But the part of me that's intellectually curious certainly wants to, connect things like the Exodus and the experience of the Israelites in slavery, and perhaps even the makeup, the botanical makeup of the bush, and connect that to that what is possible. So I have a mixed reaction, a mixed feeling inside me when I'm exposed to those kinds of conjectures. But I always appreciate them being contributed.
Yeah, to me, it resonates. It makes it even more powerful because it helps you put you in the context of the events themselves. Okay.
Yeah.
What am I
Great.
reading?
Okay, so Mitoch Hasneh.
Mitoch Hasneh. Velo ilan acher mishum imo anochi b'tzara, from Psalms. So Mitoch Hasneh, from inside the bush, and not any other tree, because mishum, because. Then it goes to Psalms. With him, I will be in trouble. I will be troubled with him. Something
Right.
like that.
I'm pretty sure we did look at this, but I'm happy to look at it again. That Rashi is pulling from Psalm 91, which is the psalm that is recited in the liturgy. It's also part of the burial ritual. And it's verse 15 from Psalm 91. It's on your screen. Yikra Eini. This is from in God's voice, when He, the human, the Jew, calls upon me, ve'enehu, and I will answer him, oneh. Imo, with him, anochi, am I, God, v'tzara, in trouble and travail. Achal sehu, I will remove him, I'll extricate him, v'achabdehu, and I will honor him. And we talked about how this is like the biblical version of the classic Footsteps poem and the Hallmark card, and it's a theology that says not only that God recognizes us in our distress and helps us, but when we are distressed, God is distressed, right? This intense association that our people have experienced or fantasized about our relationship with God, that it's not just that God noticed that we were enslaved and pulled us out, but when we were enslaved, God was enslaved. So how it's being used here is that why does God choose to appear in the sneh and not the great cedar tree, right? And we're going to see similar stuff when we get to Har Sinai. Why does God appear in a modest mountain and not the Everest of the desert? To let the Israelites know and to let us know that even and especially when Israel is in modest circumstances, painful circumstances, reduced circumstances, God not only sees us there, God is there with us. Thoughts, comments by Matt and or others on this?
I have no comment.
Okay, so let's go to the next Rashi, Ukal.
Yeah, except that I don't see how what Rashi says proves what he's saying. It says Mitoch Hasneh, from the bush, and not any other tree, because I'll be with him in trouble. What is that? How does that answer the question?
Yeah, so I would say this Rashi is less of a proof Rashi and more of the Mishum here is kind of like from the perspective of, or from the angle of, right? So you, reader, are wondering why it's a sneh, a lowly bush, and not something grand. And if you read the verse from the perspective of God saying, I'm with you in modest places, then all of a sudden this location makes sense, right? Sometimes Rashi brings a verse as a proof text. This is not a proof text. This is a color the verse in your mind, reader, this way, and then it begins to make sense. That's my read of the Rashi. Diane, Larry?
Yeah, well, I didn't remember last week, so that's why I asked you to do it. I'm with Matt. I kind of understand it. And I went to look at the Psalm and the commentary on the Psalm, at least by Benji Siegel and all that. And it's really, to me, it's a stretch. But I now see the connection. I went also to the Midrash Tanchuma at the end of Shemot 14, which is the one that's referenced in there. And it's very short. It says, it has a quote from the Psalm, translated as, I will be with him in trouble. Inasmuch as they were enslaved, I appeared in a bush of thorns, which is a place of trouble. Therefore, out of the midst of a bush which is full of thorns, I appeared unto him. So it's what you described. That's not but to tell you the truth, that's hardly the verse of Psalms that I would choose. I don't know which one I would choose, but it's pretty obtuse. So,
yeah, it's interesting. I'm glad you brought the Tanchuma, because the Tanchuma seems to make it clear that it's not just lowliness and modesty of this bush, but the thorniness of it, which actually draws, I think, a sharper connection between the verse of Imo Anochi B'tzara and the notion of a sneh. But you're right. It's still not it's not a slam dunk, right? This is not a slam dunk by Rashi. This is this is a consider reading it from this angle, kind of a commentary. That's my read of Rashi. Be interesting to see what the super commentaries on Rashi said on this verse. I didn't go deep into that before today's class. Diane?
Yeah, I sort of a general question. Is there any sense here that this took place in a vision as opposed to in actual fact? Because so many appearances of God in the story seem to take place in a vision. Is it possible that a burning bush, which is a sort of miraculous sight, suggests that this wasn't actual, that this was in a dream?
My quick answer to your question, reflecting my non-comprehensive knowledge of all the material on this verse, is no. Right? I don't know of a classic treatment of this that suggests that this is akin to Yaakov's dream, but rather that to the extent that we're reading this as stuff that happened, but that had happened, that it was Moshe's actual experience in waking. It doesn't mean there isn't a midrash out there, but I don't know of a treatment of it in that category. But just to play with it. So why do you ask? What does that? What's bubbling up for you such that that's a question?
Well, the burning bush, for one. I mean, it's like an apparition.
Interesting.
Also, flame. You think about the Brit Ben Abetarim is also a flame. That was clearly a vision, a dream vision.
Yeah. Not that I know of, but as I say half jokingly, half seriously, when you all write your Torah commentaries, you can read these verses exactly as you want to, and I mean that, right? There's nothing holding any of us back from writing in a drash or in a monograph our commentary on any particular moment in the Torah. Barbara, and then Joel. Can't hear you yet, Barbara. Still cannot hear you for some reason. It says you're unmuted, but there must be something with your microphone.
Just 1 sec.
There you are. Now we hear you.
You hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Why is the bush considered to be thorny? I don't. It just says it's a bush.
You're saying, why does the Tanchuma assume that the word sneh refers to a bush that's thorny?
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good question. Does anyone have the Brown driver, the BD, the Brown driver Briggs Biblical Dictionary in front of them? It might be that it's just kind of a known thing that the word sneh means. Leonard, what did you say last week about sneh? Is sneh the hapaxagamanon? Where's Leonard?
I think he's looking it up. He pulled out a book.
I don't think it was. I'm looking it up again here.
Joel is waiting.
I was gonna speak to that anyways. According to my concordance, it's only one other time besides this story in all of Tanakh.
Okay.
And that's in V'zot Bracha. Moshe is talking about is blessing Yosef, and he uses the word sneh, and that's the only other time in all of Tanakh.
Right. Yes, I know that laning. So we don't have any internal context in the Torah to determine if it's specifically a thorny bush. Leonard, if you have something, let us know. In the meantime, Barbara, it's a good question because you're right. It's an assumption by the Midrash that it's thorny. Marshall?
Actually, I do have the Brown Driver Briggs Dictionary.
Okay.
It says a thorny bush, a blackberry bush, and it gives several other references. And it says the word seneh means thorny.
Right. So we have two choices there, right? So either the meaning of the bush with thorns attached to it is derived from this scene with the assumption already built into it, or it's actually the case that etymologically the word sneh meant a bush with thorns, because you're right, Barbara, not every bush is thorny. That's why I was interested when Larry added the actual source in the Tanchuma. Just from Rashi, we know that what we're dealing with is something modest and small, but what Rashi is culling from a midrash that focuses on the thorniness of the bush. In a second, after I deal with the hands that are up, we'll read the Gur Aryeh, which I found on Sefaria, which is the Maharal of Prague's commentary on this Rashi. But let's go Leonard, Rebecca, and then Barry.
Okay, so Sneh is defined as a thorn bush, probably identical with the Rubus discolor, whatever that is. But
that's obvious.
But what's interesting is that there's actually cognates in several other Semitic languages where it's always a thorn bush. And in Akkadian, it's a blackberry bush. I don't know if a blackberry bush is thorny, but apparently so.
I just love the fact that someone on the planet knows how to say blackberry bush in Akkadian. Like that just makes me happy that someone has studied Akkadian that well that they not only know how to say father and mother, but they know how to say blackberry bush. Rebecca.
I want to echo that. I just found there's an article in Haaretz, which I can't really open because I don't have a password on my phone, but it says the same thing, that it's the name of what in Hebrew would now be petel, which is blackberry and is a thorny kind of bushy plant. And it does bring up Akkadian and also and the Latin rubus, and in Greek batos, that somehow are connected.
Is the rubus there spelled the way that we think of the T, the Rooibos?
No, it's Rubus.
Interesting.
So not the South African T, yeah.
We have a family friend from my father's college years who for 40 years taught ancient Semitic languages at Brandeis, Dr. Tzvi Abush. And when he would visit us, he would Wait,
what's his name?
Tzvi Abush.
Abush?
Yes, I didn't even think about that pun. His name was Asneh, A-B-U-S-C-H, Abush. Well done. We're not getting very far today, but it's been wonderful. And he used to come visit us and then randomly refer to things in our houses in their Akkadian or Ugaritic. So we had a dog whose name was very originally Kelev that he used to call Kalbu, because apparently Kalbu is you say dog in either Akkadian or Ugaritic. So it's lovely that there's such people like that who exist, who study Sumerian for our joy. Let's see. I got Barry. I don't know if Barbara's hand is up from now or from before, and then Matt's hand is still up. But let's go to Barry.
Well, the thorniness would just add to its kindling capability. This is the most kindly-ish bush that did not kindle.
Yeah, good. Matt, is your hand up from before or because?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I have a Hebrew student dictionary here that defines sneh as siach midbari kotzani, a thorny desert bush. So one more voice.
Siach midbari. Good. I wasn't aware that you could use midbar as an adjective. A deserty bush. Siach midbari. Wonderful. Okay, let's look at the Gur Aryeh for a second. Just because I found it quickly while you were discussing that. Hold on, where are you? Okay, so I've said this many times, but just to remind you, the Maharal of Prague, he does not have a linear commentary on the Parsha, on the Torah itself. He says many things about the Parsha. He doesn't have a running commentary, but he has a commentary to Rashi's commentary on the Torah. There are many super commentaries on Rashi. The Gur Aryeh and the Mizrahi are the two most common ones that you find when you have that volume. And it's interesting to see how they read Rashi's Perush. So I'll go through this just a little quickly. Imo anochi betzara. So just to be precise, here the Maharal is not quoting. He's quoting Rashi's quoting of the verse, right? He's not commenting on it, but he's like, why does Rashi use this verse? Which is the same question we're dealing with. How is this a proof text? Ein haperush klal shehu betzara chas v'shalom l'markach. Don't actually think that God is in tsuris, right? What the Gur Aryeh is referring to is as you lean into this uber intimate theology that God is with us in Sarah, that it's too anthropomorphic for the Gur Aryeh, and too limiting. Right? It's too limiting to say that God is actually in Suris. And what does it mean to have a God who's in Suris? Ach perusho, rather the meaning is shehu yitbarach, that God, may God's name be blessed. Asur bezikim b'Yisrael. An interesting phrase. Asur, as you know from halachic language, means prohibited, but it also means bound. Right? Matir asurim in the Birkot HaShachar. Blessed God who releases the bound, the shackled. Right? To be bound, which is why, by the way, it means prohibited, because you're bound by the
prisoner.
Right. So it's I think here asur is being used as a gerund, right? Not as a noun, but is bound bezikim in cables, in straps, in restraints, b'Yisrael, in Israel. It's a very subtle distinction. It's not that God is actually in Suris, but God is still shackled with us. God isn't suffering because we don't want to, he can't think of it, he can't imagine a notion of a God who suffers, but God is still actually there in our entanglements. V'hu imahem tamid, and God is with them, meaning us, always. Lachach, therefore, ka'asher Yisrael b'tzara, when Israel is in tzara, in distress, ein malchuto b'shlemut, God's kingship is not complete. So it's not that God is suffering because we don't want to imagine a God who suffers, but in the extent that we are integral partners to God's being a ruler, because God only rules if there's ruled, and if we are diminished, then God's kingdom is diminished, and God's kingship is diminished, not because God's self is diminished, but God's ability to be a king to the people is diminished because we are diminished. Lefichach, therefore, haya nirelo b'sneh. That is why, according to the Gur Aryeh, according to Rashi, God chose to appear to him in a sneh, hamorelacha, which teaches you, al ki ein malchuto b'shlemut. Imagine God in that sneh. God is trapped-ish. God is reduced-ish. God is imprisoned-ish, representing the diminished stature of God's malchut, while we, the Jewish people, are similarly restrained. So one might say that that's a distinction without a difference. If you're saying that God's kingship is diminished, then God is bitzara, is in distress. But the Maharal wants to kind of make a subtle distinction between those two concepts. It goes on, but that's the main point that he says, and that's one super commentary's attempt at trying to understand Rashi here. I didn't have time to look to see if what the Mizrahi says in that. Okay, any last questions or comments before we read the thing we were going to read to start this class 35 minutes ago?
Ukal.
Leonard and Rebecca. Wait, before Leonard and Rebecca, can we have, speaking of Perush, can we have a Perush, Matt, on the pig that Donna is hugging in your picture? Because I am so curious about that story.
Okay, you want to slow this? You just want to slow the lesson down even more? Okay, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
So we were touring in the Netherlands, and we met this lovely couple on just through some meetup thing, and they said, "Why don't we go for a bike ride in the countryside?" And we said, "Great." So we were in, was it Amsterdam? I don't think it was Amsterdam. It was some big. I think it was Rotterdam. So. We rented bikes at the train station and rode out along the canals to see where a bunch of old windmills had been placed and restored. And it was lovely. On the way back, we stopped at an inn. And we got to the inn, and there was this guy, this sort of large, round guy, dressed entirely in pink. He was driving a pink T-Bird convertible. He had it parked there. He had pink pants and a pink shirt and this cute little pink pig. And Donna said, "Oh, he's so cute. Can I pick him up?" So she did. And if you'll notice, they're both laughing. Both Donna and the pig are laughing.
That's amazing.
And that's the picture.
So many of you know.
The pig is now either 500 pounds or long since been eaten. Yeah, right.
The pig is not a Nenu Ukal. The pig has probably been Ukal.
But I think he was a pet pig. I mean, pigs are so cute and they're so smart. I mean, it's just terrible to believe them.
While we're digressing, many of you know Stuart Weiss from the shul. When one of his parents passed away, the the shiva was at his sister's home, who lives in Culver City, and his sister has a pet pig. And it was so interesting to be davening and leading a shiva minyan with a pig right in the room. And there's nothing wrong with it, right? Like, we're not supposed to consume it, but there's nothing wrong with the animal. And it was so interesting to like say the Shema and V'ahavta with a pig at your feet. That was a singular rabbinic moment for me, to do a shiva with a pig. Okay.
I don't think.
What's that?
I think that falls under what I think that falls under michmat mitama, something like that. How do you say it in Hebrew? It's just so repulsive that you can't even think about it.
Yeah, but as you say, they're cute.
No Jew in my grandfather's village would ever allow a pig into the shtibel. I don't think so.
Correct. Tova's hand is up.
Well, wait. Since I'm telling stories, one more story. My uncle said that when he was a kid in the old country, what they did one day was that they rounded up some pigs from the neighbors and they ran them through the cheder, just through the Hebrew classroom hut. And they ran the pigs through the hut, just dafka to the teacher,
Well, halachically speaking.
Since I'm telling stories.
Halachically speaking, our relationship with the pig is very different than our relationship with the combination of meat and milk. So a Jew is not allowed to consume a pig, and a Jew is not allowed to consume the combination of meat and milk. But a Jew is also not even allowed to own the combination of meat and milk, and not allowed to derive any benefit from the combination of meat and milk. And that's from the three times that the Torah says verbatim, lo tavashel gedi b'chalevi mo, you should not boil a kid in its mother's milk. The classic rabbinic source in that says that's teaching us 3 prohibitions, 3 isurim: don't eat it, don't own it, don't derive benefit from it. What does that mean? It means that you can be an Orthodox and observant Jew who owns a pig farm and derives your income from the raising of pigs, as long as you're not selling it to Jews. But you cannot own a cheeseburger farm. That would be a good thing to have on the planet, a cheeseburger farm. You're not allowed as a Jew to own or derive any benefit from the admixture of milk and meat. So our antipathy, the extent to which certain treif things are toxic to us conceptually, is much lower vis-a-vis a pig than a cheeseburger. Now you know that, if you hadn't known it before. Okay, Tova, and then Len and Rebecca, and then we will definitely read this last Rashi today.
Okay, I guess a question and an observation. I was kind of looking back and thinking about this whole image that we're talking about, and I'm wondering, as we talked about, it begins with the Malach Elohim, which seems to then disappear. Is there any precedence for in Torah or the understanding that the Levat Ha'esh was the Malach? That is, we tend to think of a Malach as being an Ish, right? That appear and have that particular function that they serve, and then we don't see them again. Could that have been the Malach that draws the attention of Moshe? Because I was glancing ahead, and we have Moshe's attention drawn to this strange spiritual phenomena, and then when God sees him turn aside, then God speaks to him and Moses shields his eyes. So we have his attention drawn visually to a sign, which is why I'm wondering if that is the Malach.
Yeah.
But then when he actually encounters God, it's again through speech, which is the paradigmatic way that we see God interact with the world, is through the word rather than visually.
Lovely supposition, Tova. I don't remember giving you permission to read ahead, so next time.
My eye skipped to the next verse.
Yeah, the way into that read, if you wanted to grammatically, would be to read the b as
right.
bilabat esh, not as in, but as right? That God, the malach of God appeared to him as a labat esh, supposed to from within a labat esh. Again, I don't know of a translation that reads it or a midrash that reads it that way, but I love the playfulness of it. It actually reminds me that I wanted us to look at Chizkuni as we continue to not read the verse. I wanted to read verse. If you go down to the bottom right of our page, actually, no, I might as well just, there's no reason for me not to bring it up to everybody. Second, I forget how easy it is to do that in Sefaria. Where would we be without Sefaria? We'd have books. That's where we would be. So I'll read the Hebrew. You can read the English there on Labat Eish. The Hebrew, Sheyihiyeh Ragil B'chach. Why does God appear to him in kind of a flaming fire? So that Moshe would become accustomed to that image. Kedei shelo yitbahel, so that he not get all famished and confused and have a shocking reaction to it. Ksheyavo Sinai, when he comes from Sneh to Sinai, which I do think is an intentional alliteration, even if it's not exactly etymologically connected, right? The first appearance of God in fire is Sneh. The next appearance of God in fire is Sinai. Min ha'esh b'habrakim, from the fire and the brimstone and the thunder that happened at Revelation. So the Chizkuni, it's not the exact same thing you were saying, Tova, but it's reminding me that the Chizkuni is trying to say that the visual here from Moshe's perspective is not just representing the relationship that God has with the Jewish people, which is how Rashi's reading it, but we're trying to accustom Moshe, and I suppose the people that Moshe is going to be leading, to God appearing in a fiery way. Now, is that appearing as fire or in fire? That's where your question is asking us to consider. But I liked Chizkuni's foreshadowing of Sinai in this Sneh moment. Okay, Leonard, Rebecca.
Okay. I'm looking at Nechama Leibowitz, and she makes an interesting observation over here. And that is that in subsequent revelations, and in fact, most of those experienced by the patriarchs, the revelation is entirely auditory. It's just the sound. In this case, you have both the sound and you have this great sight, the visual as well. And so she asks the question, how do we understand this sight? Was this revelation through fire designed merely to attract his attention, to make him look up and stare, to shock him and prepare him for what was to come? In that event, it is pointless to look for any special significance in the bush or the fact that it never burnt out. Or alternatively, was the bush really meant to be symbolic, subject to both general and detailed interpretation? And then he goes through the various commentators. So Rashi goes into the first camp where he totally ignores the significance of the bush and he just says, oh, it got his attention. And then she talks about the other ones where they go through the interpretation of what the meaning of the bush is, including Chizkuni.
Great. While we're living that, I want to give a shout out to my niece in Framingham, Massachusetts, Daphna, who I think is watching on Facebook because she just texted me, "You should get a pig. Give Paddington a friend." So I think that for people who are watching from far away, the thing that is most interesting so far in this shiur is the pink Dutch pig. So hello, Daphna, if you're still watching. Okay, Diane, Larry, and then I'm calling it, and then Matt's going to read the Rashi.
At one point, I forgot, in my story, I forgot a key detail was that the man's face was also very pink. So, in a very Dutch way.
That is
carry on.
Very key detail. Okay, Diane, Larry.
I'll be very brief. First of all, I'm thrilled that you went to Chizkuni by yourself, but you should have gone to the next Chizkuni.
Okay.
In answer to Tova, which also gets back to something I talked about last week.
Should I pull it up?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, hold on.
Because it's actually great.
Okay. Go ahead.
So, some commentators explain that seeing an angel is a completely disembodied intelligence and has no physical aspect at all. I'm going to stop there. But also, flame is disembodied. And so the whole idea of this disembodiment of Diane called it a vision, but of intelligence, of speaking, which is also disembodied, that there's a physicality of the bush, which we have a lot of commentators talking about, but we've also then got the disembodied message, voice, flame, angel, all hovering there inside of the bush. I mean, to me, it's just a wonderful image. And the last thing I'm going to say is in the third Chizkuni, which we won't talk about yet because we haven't gotten to the third Rashi, he references Shemot Rabbah too. And I really commend to everybody afterwards, go to Sefaria, go to Shemot Rabbah 2, verse 5, read the whole thing. It's fantastic. There's some unbelievably wonderful references in there. I don't know why we're not reading Midrash Rabbah alongside of all this.
Well, that will be our next class, right? When we finish Dvarim, we'll come back to the beginning and do the whole thing through Midrash Rabbah. I mean, you're right that once you're swimming in this sea, quite literally, there's an endless amount of tributaries we could be going down. And I love the tributaries we do off of Rashi, and I also love that our main ship here is the ship of Rashi. I don't know if I can pull up on Safari the actual Hebrew of Chizkuni, because the Hebrew is actually interesting. Let me see. Yeah, so here's the Hebrew, right? It's always good to see the original. What Larry just read as the translation, the Hebrew is Yesh Mefarshim. There's some who say, Mipnei Shekulo. It's interesting. I have in my Chizkuni, the next word is Moach.
Yeah, me too.
Because it's hard to know if the reference here is God or the angel. Is all Moach means brain, but I think what is going on here is all thought. It's not non-material. It's all ethereal. Ein yecholet, there is no possibility lacharot bo to carve, to etch for God or in God's name or in the angel's name partsuf semel, some kind of a symbol of a face. So it's an entirely different way of reading why fire in Sneh. It's like I can't believe I'm going to tell this joke. It was one of my grandfather's favorites that a guy is walking down a street in Lower East Side and he's looking to buy a watch, and he passes by a store, and there's the image of a watch on the store. He says, perfectly, a watch store. And he goes in and says, yes, I'd like to buy a watch. And the guy says, excuse me, this is not a watch store. He says, what do you do for things? He says, I'm a moil. And the guy says, you're a moil? Why do you have a watch on the outside of your store? He says, what did you want me to have on the outside of my store, right? Ba-dum-bum. So the notion is that how else could God have been portrayed or displayed or presented if not in something that is ethereal like this and non-material? And even the notion of the flame not consuming the bush, like it's a different notion than a bush on fire. A bush on fire is something that is material in the real world. This is not. It's like a mixture of those two. So thank you, Chizkuni. Thank you, Larry, for pointing us there. Matt, please read Ukal.
You sure? All right.
I'm positive.
Ukal. Ne'echal. In other words, was passive, was eaten. Kemo, lo ubad ba. It wasn't lost in it. These are examples from Dvarim, and another example of the passive is Asher Lukach Misham from Bereshit, which was taken from there.
Right. So let's look at these both in person. My supposition as to why Rashi is doing this is that there are indeed two passive binyanim in Hebrew, nifal and pu'al, and nifal is more common, and these are both pu'al, and this is Rashi doing grammar. Rashi saying, reader, in case you're confused by the pu'al form, I'm telling you, this is a pu'al form, and you probably know more words in that form than you think, reader, and I'll give you two examples. Okay, so Dvarim Kaf Aleph, this is, anyone know the context of this verse? I go up, it'll give it away. Kimatzeh halal ba'adama. This is the unclaimed corpse, right? Someone who's been who's died or who's been killed in between two towns. And how do you right that wrong? And how do you somehow deal with the fact that there is a body that no one is claiming, right? So some of you know what the rule is, but we're focusing on the verse. V'ha'ir, this is verse 3. Ha'ir asher krova el halal, the city that is closest to that body. V'lakchu ziknei ha'ir hahi, the elders of that town shall take eglat bakar, a calf of a young cow. Asher lo, which has not ubad ba, been worked, right? Never been yoked. Ubad. It could have been ne'evad, but it's ubad. If I were even more of a grammar nerd than I am, I would give you a discursus on the differences, like what are the subtle differences between those two passive forms. and I actually make this mistake all the time in spoken Hebrew, the difference between nizgar and sagur, right? Like if a store is telling you when it is closing, it'll be nizgar b'sheish or nizgeret b'sheish. If the store is telling you it is closed, it's sgura, right? Or sagur. And so there is a difference between these two passive forms. And in this particular situation, the Torah chose ubad, has not been worked, which is a little bit different than ne'abad. And the other one, you know this verse probably even more commonly, is the banishment of the Garden of Eden. Vayishalchehu Adonai Elohim migan Eden. God banished, sent away him, really them, from the Garden of Eden, la'avod et ha'adama, to work the very land. I think it's just coincidence that you have the root la'avod, whereas the previous incident was ubad. Asher lukach misham, from which he was taken. He was taken from Adama. Rashi could have chosen yet a more well-known verse from when Eve is created. Find it quickly. When Eve is named. Yeah. So look at verse 23. Vayomer ha'adam, the man, the human said, Zot hapam, this is the one. Etzem me'atzamai, bone from my bones. Uvasar mibsari, flesh from my flesh. Lezot yikarei isha, therefore she will be called. Interesting. Yikarei. Will be called isha. Ki meish, from man, lukachazot. That's the feminine of lukach, because she was taken from him. So this whole weight for this last Rashi in this verse is for us to just do a simple grammar lesson. Don't be confused, reader, by the pu'al form. You find it in more situations than you realize. Okay. Any things going once, going twice? Marshall, Bakasha.
The Gelbard commentary, Lishuto Shel Rashi, makes a point that the word einenu is generally only used with present tense. So the question was, ukal, is that ne'echal?
Yeah.
Ne'echal in the present tense would have a kamatz under the chaf.
Uh-huh.
And in the past tense would have a patach under the chaf. So the question is, in our text, why is it the word ukal has a kamatz under the chaf? Is it because it's at the end of the word in a pausal form, or why is it there?
You're saying that ukal is past tense pu'al as opposed to present tense pu'al? Is that
yes, that exactly. I can't find a pu'al past tense in my 501 dictionary of verbs, but
that question is a good one. It's beyond my pay grade. I don't know. I don't know.
I don't understand it either. So
I find it interesting that Onkelos, I think we looked at this last week, doesn't want to go anywhere near the pu'al and translates it as a hitpa'el, or itpa'el in Aramaic. Mit achil. What somehow like is not almost like consuming itself, is not being consumed, but it's reflexive. He's not comfortable, and there is a form in Aramaic he could have done that does not go to the itpa'el. So that uncomfortable, whatever ukal is, whatever form it's in, Onkelos did not want to keep it there in the Aramaic.
Yeah, I think we'll have to check it out in the book by Grammar Moses.
Yes, exactly. Okay, let's for the last 3 minutes start reading the next verse because it's a good one. Whom have we not heard from today? Elon, do you want to read verse 3, Vayomer Moshe?
Sure. Vayomer Moshe, Asura na, ve'er'eh et hamareh hagadol hazeh, madua lo yiv'ar hasneh. And Moses said, what is Asura na?
Right, good question. That's what Rashi is going to be asking. The root is probably Samech Reish or Samech Vav Reish, which means to remove, to distance, something like that. So if that's the general root, what do you think asurana might mean?
Don't look at?
It's really a hard word because the in front of asura suggests that Moses is speaking in the first person, and the na, usually the na is an untranslatable word that softens a request, that almost is like an implied please. So, and sometimes it's rendered in English as let it not or let it be. So one way of doing asura not is it's so hard to do. May I remove? May I step aside? Should I step aside? Something like that, where the na is softening what Moshe is actually saying to himself, right? Let me step aside. Keep going, and then I'm going to hear what Vered has to say, because I'd love to hear your translation of it. So let me step aside.
And see this great sight. Why did the bush not burn?
Good. And it's so interesting. The yiv'ar, again, we say all the time that tense means something different in Hebrew than it does in English, and it certainly means something different in biblical Hebrew. The form yiv'ar looks like a future verb. So is he really saying, why will it not burn? Or is it somehow a verb constructed as a future is actually talking about the present tense? Why is this snet not burning? Okay. Vered Babakasha, enlighten us, and then Matt, and then we'll call it a day. Lo shomim otach, Vered.
Here we are.
Yeah.
So the verb asura is in the shoresh is samech vav reish. It's a form in grammar called cohortative, and you described it well, which means it's kind of a command, but a very, very soft command, a very nice command. May I, shall I? And the verb lasur means to step aside if in pa'al. If you take it in different binyanim, it means differently. And so I read it as pa'al, may I or should I step aside? Like, don't come very close to the burning bush, but just retreat myself, go a little bit back. You can also read it as the opposite of the word mutar, asur, which means forbidden. Don't do it. Don't come close. It's burning, it's fire. Don't come close. So you either look at it as a verb, sur, in pa'al, cohortative, or you look at it as the word asur, which is the opposite of mutar, forbidden or allowed.
Good.
Should I?
Can you? Is there a common, obvious use to this verb in modern Hebrew that we might know? I can't. Do you use it in Pal in modern Hebrew?
Which one? Asura? No. This cohortative? No. We're not.
But even the shoresh, just the shoresh. Does the
shoresh? The shoresh, yes, is a very used shoresh. Tasur elai achar kach, or tasur lesham. Yeah, we use it. In Hefil, it means to remove. So that's a total. It's the same shoresh, but means differently. This is pa'al. Asura as a soft command, cohortative. May I, should I? And that's the ending with the kamatz hey. And it's always only in future, first person.
Toda. So lovely to have that contribution. Matt, quickly, because I know we're over time. You're still muted, though. You're muted. Unmute, man.
I'm going to sing one verse of a Hanukkah song, Surah Hoshech Halashcho.
Good. Exactly.
Surah Mipnei Ha'or.
Right. Perfect. Leonard, remember what we were going to say next week? I want to just point to you that Onkelos translates Asura as atpnei, like lifnot, to turn. Maybe I should turn away, something like that. And Everett Fox translates this as Moshe said, now let me turn aside. Now let me turn aside is how he does Asurana. So we'll start there and see Rashi says one thing on this verse, and what he says is trying to understand Asurana.
Yeah,
So
Rabbi, there's one more. There's one more sense of sur from Tehillim. Sur me'ra ve'asetzov b'kei shalom v'rod vehu.
Good, very, very good. A pleasure to study with all of you.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.